because that's a Fugazi. All right?
That's a Fugazi? How do you know it's a Fugazi? You looked at it for 2 seconds.
Well, it's a fake.
Yeah, I know what a Fugazi is.
It's all a Fugazi. You know what a Fugazi is?
Fugazi, it's fake.
Yeah, Fugazi, it's a wazi, it's a woozy, it's a fairy dust.
Coin Fugazi.
Coin Fugazi.
Coin Fugazi. Coin Fugazi. Coin Fugazi. Coin Fugazi.
All right, so this is exciting. I've got two guests this time around. Sean Ballard, who's an investor and businessman involved in cryptocurrency, and Tobias Ruck, who is pretty well known to the Bitcoin Cash community for his involvement in projects like B.Cash and Mitra. And having them on today and for this particular episode is important because we're discussing the future of Bitcoin Cash, the November 15th, 2020 upgrade, and what that means with regard to the new Coinbase rule, which is getting all sorts of hype. But I wanted to hear their perspective as business people, as builders, and what it means to them. So without any further ado, let me start off with Sean. Sean, man, thanks so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
It is an immense honor to be on your show, Kelso, and to give a little color to my following your work. My last job that I had, I was working at a bank as an investment analyst. And, when you're at your cubicle with your buddies, in the morning, you're reading your Bloomberg, your Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, whatever. And I literally had your CoinSpice articles up every morning while everyone was reading their Bloomberg. And it was extremely relevant. But yeah, to give a little background into kind of my view and how I approach and got into Bitcoin. My degree is in economics. I played football at William & Mary. And that kind of created some fertile ground into an understanding of why Bitcoin was big as, monetary history, and coming from that lens. And then I also got my master's in accounting, which that led me to work in DC as a corporate financial auditor at a big public accounting firm. And since 2015, I've been shilling, buying, stacking sats, 100% into Bitcoin. And yeah, so I'm really excited at the Bitcoin Cash prospects with the new Coinbase rule, because we are kind of experiencing a phase shift in going from it being a little tech enthusiast hobby project into being a professional network that can actually build the necessary infrastructure to make it peer-to-peer electronic cash for the world. And yeah, right now I'm coming to you live from Alaska, and continuing to shill Bitcoin from up here. So I'm really happy to be on.
Very nice. So that's the high praise, and I appreciate you saying that. So you would describe sort of your role in the crypto space as, I guess, being an investor, right?
Investor, adoption agent, and I actually left my corporate gig as an auditor to pursue Bitcoin full time down in Raleigh, and I was approaching a lot of businesses, local small businesses, in particular farmers markets, to try to get them to adopt it. And it's a really hard sell, given that, in America, banking is so sophisticated and it doesn't really present a real problem yet for those local businesses. And this is where I'm super excited about Bcash and what Tobias is doing. It's going to allow me to get back and to really pursue more sustainably being an adoption agent and spreading Bitcoin to the world, and particularly in America.
That's a perfect segue, actually. into welcoming Tobias Ruck onto the show. Tobias, man, thanks again for coming back on. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. And also good job on pronouncing my name. I think that's praiseworthy.
Tobias.
Oh, yeah.
And Tobias, of course, is coming to us from Deutschland, from the motherland, the fatherland, I guess, from Germany, right? So in case people don't know, I think a lot of the Bitcoin Cash community also already knows you, but just in case they don't, kind of tell us your involvement in BCH.
So I initially was more of a lurker, but then I figured out more and more interesting stuffs that we can do with like Bitcoin Cash, and especially covenants with the object datasig thing. And one of the first things I made was SLP DEX, which allowed partial SLP trades. But then I came up with an even better idea, which is B.Cash, which allows offline payments from, which isn't the interesting part. The interesting part is that it allows card payments, which basically everybody in the Northern Hemisphere, everybody in America is very used to using credit cards, which I think could be like the missing link between like where we're at now and hyper-Bitcoinization, however that looks like. And yeah, and that's that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm catalyzing, and that's what I'm working on. Yeah, I think I would not lie if I would say that I'm the most proficient in script programming as it's manifest on Bitcoin Cash chain.
Boom. And I find it interesting that two guys who want to build on Bitcoin Cash, one in the adoption realm, the investment realm, and the other as a pure business in the case of Tobias and B.Cash, that you're gravitating towards this new idea, this new Coinbase rule for Bitcoin Cash, because it's kind of bold. I mean, it's something that I think has taken quite a few people by surprise. And I guess I've sort of jumped around what the issue is, but the issue is basically taking 8% of the block reward and redirecting that towards infrastructure development, and with a global network council, and really professionalizing Bitcoin Cash and the undergirding, kind of the unsexy, the unseen aspects of Bitcoin Cash, and making it solid and all that good stuff. And I think there's a good argument to be made for it, just without appealing to business people necessarily, or to devs necessarily. But I have you both on for that specific reason, to make the case. And I'm going to throw it back to Sean real quick. Sean, we've kind of chatted a little bit, so I know you support the new Coinbase rule for Bitcoin Cash. Why do you find it important, significant, or I guess the question is, why do you support it?
Yeah, I mean, you said it best, actually. I think it was in your podcast with young Colin Einstead. And I made the comment on the YouTube video, and it's just, if incentives aren't aligned, then we're not having the right conversation. And if they are aligned, we are. And this
So
really
how does it do that, I
ties.
guess? Go ahead.
Well, it ties. Well, it turns hobby coders into actual professionals, to where they're getting paid. They have, not a set salary, because the volatility of the crypto space, but that's also, they're gonna benefit from the product of their work and actually delivering on their timelines and on the roadmap. So it's an amazing alignment of incentives, and it's a crucial innovation into moving Bitcoin Cash forward, in my view.
Yeah, and I find it fascinating, because it's something that if those who are new to Bitcoin Cash might believe that this is an innovation, like this just sort of fell out of the sky, but it actually goes back quite a few years to at least 2018, where this was sort of kicked around. And at the time, mining pool operators and mining companies and miners themselves were very much for this, but they could not figure out a way to kind of push it forward. And kind of tossing it to Tobias here. Tobias, sorry, I just did it again. Tossing it to Tobias here for a second. You're actually a very vocal a proponent of the new Coinbase rules. I see you online and so on, and you kind of put your reputation out there a little bit to back it. Why? As a business, as someone who's and B.Cash, if listeners don't already know, has gotten praise from literally everybody who's interacted with it. He's kind of shielded at conferences from London to London and beyond, and a lot of the heavy hitters love the B.Cash idea. So it was interesting to me that you gravitated towards the new Coinbase rule, and especially someone so celebrated, because you had a lot to lose if people disagreed with you, at least on paper. Why do you support it, Tobias?
So I think there's two reasons. I mean, there's probably more, but two come to my mind right now. I think the first one is just having worked with Amaury and having that hands-on experience, how he ticks, and not just hanging out, but working professionally with him. I mean, it was very short. It was just I think 2 weeks or something, but I think that's all I should spare. That's the one aspect, and the other aspect is that it really makes sense from a economics perspective, and also from to put it from a different view, from okay, this can be the next evolution of money, basically, of how we do how we do Bitcoin, how we do the development. I from the first part. So when I was working with Amaury, I learned two things. First, that he has his edges. He's not absolutely perfect, but what I also learned is that he really, really cares about Bitcoin Cash and that nothing goes wrong. I was this dude who didn't really know C++, who was okay, let's make this really simple opcode, which I think Tom Sanders said it's 2 lines. It actually turned out to be 3 lines. So joke's on you, Tom Sanders. It's more complicated than you thought, because there's also the break keyword. I'm mostly kidding. And but on top of that, Amaury really demanded that it's thoroughly tested. Even though it's just this small little thing, I mean, there could be a bug in the standard library of C++. It should really be it should be thorough. It should be done professionally. In other words, there should be no error. And I had a debate with, I think, Jonathan Tumim about that particular thing, and he said that's just a waste. Why put so much energy into making this relatively simple change so secure? That's a bit wasteful. But the what turns out that on BCHD, which I haven't, I think I contributed exactly 1 line of code. Anyway, they also implemented op reverse bytes, and I mean, no. Not to I think Chris Pischer is doing an amazing job with BCHD. So sure. There's nothing against that, but it turns out that actually there was a bug in the implementation of OP reverse bytes on BCHD, which of course that's a massive code base, and I think he inherited from other people and is doing backports there. But I think that really showed me, okay, this is really, really not trivial. Like this is a really, really hard problem to solve, like writing a node software. And then I was like, okay, this really showed me, okay, on the one hand, we have this guy who really cares about Bitcoin Cash and knows how to, do it professionally. But on the other hand, it's really hard for him to find the time, find the talent, all of these things. And I already played around actually with the idea myself, okay, how could we do the funding? How could I monetize Bitcoin Cash? Because that's the way I'm thinking. And something like an IFP was, okay, yeah, this could be done. Like it would be probably hard to do that in a like consensus kind of way. But yeah, and once Amaury was like, no, it wasn't Amaury, it was Zhang Soer. I'm not sure if I pronounced it correctly, but I think you know what I mean, who I mean. I was like, oh yeah, finally, that makes sense. Like finally somebody is doing it. So it's a very different kind of road that you took, Kelso. Like you were like, okay, it's kind of not the best thing, but it's the best option we have, basically, from all we got. But for me, it was like, yeah, this makes sense inherently. Like this is just a logical thing to do. And yeah, I think it really can be a new, a kind of like a paradigm shift of which some people are really, really scared about, I think, and that's totally understandable. Like I think BCHN has really, really a right to exist for like having this vision of a peer-to-peer cash, which is like I think I recently heard it in the Soko. I forgot his name, like the Zcash guy, Soko, I think it's name. I don't know how.
Zuko, that's okay.
Zuko, yeah. Here I am demanding people that they pronounce my name correctly, and I'm struggling already with 3 people. I think I mispronounced Kenya. Anyway, and he was like, okay, Linux is like, it lost its vision. Like it kind of completely lost its vision. The Linux operating system, and then now it's like this really, really corporate thing, which like isn't really going into the original vision of like people having like their own operating system that they have full control over. And now, like I am here using Mac because like it's just the best option there in my view, and not Linux. So yeah, and I think a lot of people are like afraid that the same thing will happen to Bitcoin Cash, where it's like just turns into this corporate thing, which just like isn't even for the people, so to speak. But in my view, that not having this Coinbase rule makes it more likely to become kind of a corporate thing, because we have evidence of that in the past. Like BTC suffered basically corporatizing. I'm sure if it's a word.
It was almost captured.
Yeah, almost. Like we can argue about that, and I wasn't really too like I was really a total lurker at that time when that happened. So I wasn't really aware of what went on there. But from what I understood, like it changed the vision somewhat to accommodate for other business models. And then we had BSV, which also kind of changes the idea. Maybe not as corporate, but they have like this different kind of view. And now I'm like, okay, I'm starting to see a pattern here. And the IFP also has some of that vibe of like professionalizing or like corporatizing, but it's doing it with very different incentives from BTC and BSV, which I think allows us to really reap the benefits of like being professional and being profit driven. Basically, the IFP has the same business model that I have, like B.cash. B.cash takes an output for every transaction it makes. And the IFP, it's basically doing exactly the same thing. Each output of each transaction of that's when it goes over Bitcoin Cash, so not just B.Cash, but the entire network, they get a small cut. Like you could even see it as exactly the same technically, but just aggregated into the Coinbase output. So, like, frankly, it would be kind of hypocritical for me to be like, oh yeah, actually, I want to do this business model, but you guys, you have to do it in a different kind of way. And frankly, I think the just take an output as a profit or as a revenue thing, like this model. I think this is the future of Bitcoin Cash. And
if I may, I
feel free
wanted
to jump in.
I wanted to highlight, like, don't cut yourself short with the innovation of B.Cash and the affiliate program, because in the same way it's aligning developers to the network and driving them to, attain those objectives on the roadmap. With the B.Cash affiliate output, it's going to drive me to continue doing what I love and knocking doors, approaching businesses and getting them set up with Bitcoin and with B.Cash in particular, because I'm not aware of anything else that's doing that. So in the same way that the Coinbase rule is extremely beneficial for the network, B.Cash really is as well. It's just not necessarily on the protocol level, but it's built on top of it.
Yeah, I was going to ask Sean how, and I guess you kind of already answered it, but how your economics and accounting background gives you some insight into the new Coinbase rule and why it's important. And you talked about incentives, you talked about professionalism, and then you just hit on being incentivized in a very practical way with regard to referrals and so on. So after the 15th, after November 15th, and it goes through this, what do you expect, Sean, to happen to BCH? Like, how does it change? Is it something that I guess people outside of the BCH community will immediately notice, or will we grow horns, or what happens after the 15th?
Hopefully nothing really changes, except that we're no longer in a civil war. We're no longer, fighting over the network effect of Bitcoin Cash, and Bitcoin ABC and other developers can continue working on the infrastructure. And I think as Amaury put it, is, the end consumer and people using it don't want to have to think about the infrastructure. You walk into your house, the lights work, the plumbing works, water's running and all that, the electricity, everything. It's not something that you really want to think too deeply about and solve. You want paid professionals that know what they're doing to take care of it. And you can have that certainty now with the Coinbase rule, that we have a proven team that can continue the development so that Bitcoin Cash is Bitcoin Cash. It's peer-to-peer electronic cash for the world. And that's going to further incentivize people to use it and build on it and invest in it.
So yeah, Sean, you were saying, and I wanted to jump in kind of rudely here and ask you a little bit about Amaury Séchet. I find him to be one of the most intriguing, interesting guys in crypto who doesn't get a lot of press. And I think what sort of brought me around to the new Coinbase rule was certainly my interviews with him and my professional interactions with him, but also just in my skeletal trace memory here of the last 3 or so years, the battles this dude has fought and what he's withstood. What does it mean to have a team like Bitcoin ABC and Amaury Séchet kind of helming or being the reference implementation for Bitcoin Cash? And why is that so important after the 15th?
Well, I want to say I'm definitely aligned with your takes on Amaury. I think you wrote some recaps specifically, and you've obviously interviewed him a lot. And I actually, what comes to mind as you asked me that question, is, and I actually started watching it because you quoted Johannes, I believe that's how you pronounce his name, of LOCAD.
Right.
Yeah, I think it was, I can't remember what the impetus or why he was doing this presentation, which was like a tech auditor's review of Bitcoin as a whole. And I mean, he said it beautifully. And to put Johannes into perspective, he's on the supply chain side of tech, which is, I mean, if you don't know how crucial and how big supply chain is, I encourage you to look it up. It's massive, and kind of what the underbelly and the infrastructure of what fuels international trade in the economy. And he's an investor, and what he said about Amaury was that he is the CTO you can hardly ever afford. And he did talk about his leadership qualities, his effectiveness, as well as his just technical competency. And so you like to see a guy that knows what he's talking about, kind of leading the front for achieving that roadmap. And he's very clear and concise about what needs to be done and how they're going to do it. And now there's going to be a team of professionals that are going to be able to manifest the roadmap and do it quickly and capitalize on this window of opportunity that we have for Bitcoin Cash, maintaining competitiveness in the advent of, in the words of Hayden, the fiat endgame.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that as well. With your, I keep going back to your background here in accounting and economics, but we're in a very weird, to put it mildly, part of economic history, and I have some kind of armchair training in it. In that I'm not like you in learned and so on. I just kind of am a fanboy of some of these ideas in terms of the Austrian school and I guess classical economics as laissez-faire economics as we understand them. But a lot of the training that I have, and I assume you as well, and you certainly have more mainstream in the sense that you've been part of academia, so you've got both of those.
Well, don't get it wrong. My degree was based in Keynesianism, and
there it is.
It was only after being in DC in that professional environment where I was walking around DC, and I was like, if I went into a bar, saw an alumni, and said I had an economics degree, like, I don't know what I would talk about. And so then that's what got me to where I actually learned economics from the Austrian side. And as far as I can tell, Kelso, you definitely got it down. The Austrian economics, at least the big picture.
Well, that's nice of you to say, but I'm a little worried because, to put it mildly, right? This seems unprecedented to me. So with this that I'm referring to, the outlays, just pure digital money fiat money being flung into the ether, the unprecedented intervention in the economy by governments all over the world. This is not something that philosophically, I think I've got some of the answers,
right.
But if you scratch me, if you really go, hardcore into it, it's unnerving. So why does Bitcoin Cash, and I think I kind of know your answer, but I want to hear you give it anyway. Considering where we are, why does Bitcoin Cash make any sense in this particular economic environment?
Why does it make any sense? I mean, unless you're in the know and you're a techie and you're kind of like, because Bitcoin is a multidisciplinary thing, being open source software, but yet being, engineered money. It really doesn't make sense for at least the first world because we have sophisticated, banking, fintech. So I actually, when I was struggling to reach people on the fiat endgame and Bitcoin as the most viable alternative, I was legitimately thinking about going to more third world countries and getting them onboarded. And I believe, isn't there a Coinbase journalist that's in Venezuela right now?
Yeah, Linzerd. Yeah.
Yeah. I legitimately was flirting with that idea because it does make sense to them. And
same by the way, but
what's
just
that?
floating. I also was flirting with that idea, but yeah.
Yeah, well, you solved it yourself to where I don't have to go down to third world countries, and I can actually sustain myself and my my operating expenses, if you will, in America with the Bcash affiliate program. So yeah, I mean, Bitcoin, it doesn't make sense yet, I guess is my answer, but I'm trying to get my loved ones and people that are asking the question and, have some concern to at least, let me send you some Bitcoin. Like, download the wallet. I used to use Cointext, but they just recently had to cease their operations, which is, that kills me because I was their biggest fan. I used it all the time.
As a silver lining, I think they announced that they will continue with an even better service afterwards. So maybe
I think so too.
Will help. Yeah.
That definitely is good to hear. And once Bitcoin Cash catches on, it'll definitely be a valued service, especially for the third world, who don't have sophisticating banking and payment methods.
And I think we're watching right now. We're in the latter part of October of 2020, and we're watching the crypto market kind of catch fire a little bit here. And it's anybody's guess as to why that ever happens. But my suspicion is there is some movement towards hedging, especially by younger folks that can kind of see some of this weird printing going on. And the sort of a natural distrust in political money, but it's certainly not there to the degree, Sean, that you so rightly pointed to, and that we're not there yet. But Bitcoin Cash, to me, kind of settles in between the BTC idea, which, for all intents and purposes, now is digital gold. It's going to be a settlement layer, and they're just not into transacting in the way that currency or medium of exchange might be. But it seems to be once people sort of hit on to the Bitcoin idea, the BTC idea, if there's a chance that they still want to stay in crypto after they get a little disenchanted there, I think Bitcoin Cash with the net, and you also talked about the network effect earlier, that Bitcoin Cash is positioned right beneath it, that it's right there. And it has kind of it's the same feel, the same texture, the same basic assumptions, except that it's faster, cheaper, and more reliable. I think it really does bode well for whatever might happen in terms of world economics. In that there is I'm not quite to where Hayden is yet in terms of the fiat endgame, but I'm starting to get there, and I'm starting to really think that something like a Bitcoin Cash, assuming it has a stable foundation, assuming that it's got its stuff together and we're not arguing over the same junk every 6 months, that going forward it could really provide an answer.
Yeah, no, and we need it to provide an answer and capitalize on that window of opportunity. Once I guess the markets start to settle, because it's this influx of money is shaking things up, and it hasn't quite adjusted to it, and as well as the artificially low federal funds rates, and which Austrians have been banging the table about for forever.
And it's just a matter of time before the business cycle reactivates.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right.
And Tobias, why don't you weigh in here, because I haven't heard kind of your take, especially being in the European Union. I know you've got some plans to maybe
Escape.
yeah
Escape the gulag.
yeah, exactly. What's your feeling now? We'll kind of end it on this note here about what Hayden Otto. If listeners aren't familiar, I want to make sure I give him a nice shout out. Hayden Otto is the adoption guru par excellence, especially in Northern Australia. He's the head of BitcoinBCH.com and just an incredible thinker and doer and producer. And he's convinced that stuff's about to break loose and there just has to be a viable alternative to fiat. And he believes that is, at least theoretically, it can be one of the answers anyway, can be something like BCH, Bitcoin Cash, if it has a stable team, if it's not, fighting itself, and it's focused on the roadmap. What are your thoughts? Being so, Sean and I are here in the United States, and we're cranky Austrian libertarians. What's your kind of your view from the old country?
So for my credentials, I listened to the audiobook of Human Action. So I think that fully qualifies me. Yeah, I'm actually
Jeff Riggenbach. Was he the guy who did the audio?
Oh, I love that guy.
I think so. I didn't pay attention back then who read it because I wasn't that deep into the personality of Austrian economics or
really deep, strong voice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's him. I don't know. I'm not sure if that's too relevant.
The point is, you listen to all of Human Action, which is awesome.
Yeah, and I'm actually now, I just pulled up the gold price in Papiermark, which is like the German currency from before Hitler, basically, more or less. And yeah, and the interesting thing is it kind of takes it slowly and then it takes it very quickly. I think we lost, I'm looking at, 8 orders of magnitude in value within 3 months or 4 months. And before that, it's it takes 1 order of magnitude in 2 years or something like that. Which is still a lot, 1 order of magnitude. If gold goes from $2,000, which is at around now, to $20,000, I think that is already in crazy territory. But I'm not sure if I think I'm a bit more optimistic than Hayden is. I think we're still stuck with the US dollar for a bit longer, not too long, but a bit. Because I think the US dollar, there's still a lot of demand just for the US dollar because you have to pay your taxes. You have to accept it as a payment of debt and so forth. That's why I'm a bit more bullish, so to speak, on stablecoins. Because also it's easier for accounting. If you try doing accounting with Bitcoin Cash, I had to do my taxes with that, and it's not very nice.
Can confirm.
Yeah, and for me it gets even worse because I have to convert that to euro also. So
yeah, and I did actually want to bring that up before. One of my value props when I was approaching businesses was my accounting, my master's of accounting. I was like, and once you start accepting Bitcoin and there's going to be, some accounting treatments, I can provide that for a fee. That was my naive approach.
Once I introduce this nightmare into your business.
It definitely did not go over too well.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
And
I did want to point out a really short point as far as the dollar goes and, being a little bit more bullish, if you can even say that, is it Jeff Deist puts it incredibly well. And for anyone that's interested in understanding Bitcoin economics, go to the Mises Institute. It is a godsend.
Mises.org. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is. There's a treasure trove of content on there. But what Jeff Dice said about the dollar and what economists say is that to explain, because Austrians are so perplexed as to how it still maintains its dominance and its value despite, constant money printing, is they say it's the least dirty shirt in the laundry.
That's a great way
true,
to put it.
Actually, because the euro actually went down more in value, and the Polish zloty went down even more than the euro. So it's actually the dollar who's the most reliable fiat currency, I think, at all, or the one that lost the value the least. And I think another thing that
so crazy. But go ahead.
I think many Bitcoin Bcashers and Bitcoin cashers forget is that the way Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin is structured from the emission schedule is that it's kind of really, really hard for it to stabilize, because you have this fixed emission schedule, which is not based on demand. So supply and demand isn't really a thing in the emission of Bitcoin. If you have gold, if the gold price goes up, then you kind of have a dampening on that by people just minting more gold or mining more gold. But with Bitcoin Cash, we really don't have that. So I think it will take a really long time for Bitcoin Cash to have any sort of stable value, because if the demand goes up, the price goes up, and then it'll be, have a higher price. But if the demand goes down, then there isn't really something to dampen that. It'll just, go down. And that's why I think we should start treating Bitcoin Cash more as a commodity. And I mean, we read Human Action. We just talked about Human Action, and Mises is very clear that money always is first a commodity. It first.
This is his famous regression theorem, right?
Exactly. I forgot the name, but I wasn't aware. Anyway, I don't want to drop my credentials too much here. Just to put that thought out there, what if we also focused our energy, or maybe even primarily focused our energy, on making Bitcoin Cash something people want to have, not as a medium of exchange, but as something that has utility, that something provides them value. I think in my last presentation, which should be online, the one with all the smart people, which I unfortunately dropped from, I basically said we have the technology to build something like Uber for financial services. So for people who aren't aware, Uber is basically a taxi company that doesn't need a taxi license, just to the way they're structured. And we have a very regulated financial system. We have a very regulated insurance system. We have a very regulated gambling, betting system or systems. Why don't we take advantage of the non-custodial and the smart contract nature of Bitcoin Cash and turn Bitcoin Cash into a commodity that people want to have, that people want to, they have it to use it, it's like doing the laundry, or I don't know, something like that. And then people will store it because they know there are these people that, or they would store it for themselves because I can use it, but then they at some point will also store it because they know other people want it. And as soon as that happens, adoption is basically for free, because merchants will be very eager to accept this because they know there's a demand for that. That's basically Mises' regression theorem for you.
And this is the argument that was made 2010, 2011, 12, 13 for BTC. I mean, I'm getting so much deja vu. I think Bitcoin Cash has the way to make that happen as a commodity money, and finding that balance between the medium of exchange, store of value, unit of account, all those different ideas. I think it can do that. And I think we've maybe missed that a little bit because we were so busy on the other side of things. And I don't.
Ethereum is way ahead there.
Yeah. Right. Sean, being the expert between the three of us here, What are your thoughts on what Tobias is saying about it maybe leaning more towards a store of value going forward if we have, the new Coinbase rule and a stable protocol, and we're building something that has sort of an inherent value, I guess.
Well, I was actually going to throw it to you, Kelso, because I know you were saying kind of more focusing the Bitcoin Cash branding and emphasizing the store of value properties. And I know Amaury talked about that. But I mean, and from the regression theorem, the value comes from its ability to be exchanged. Like you hold on to something because you know that later down the line, someone will accept it. So, it's kind of two blades of the same scissor. Nice. You can't separate them. And that's actually an analogy from Thomas Sowell's Basic Economics.
Very nice.
The two blades of the same scissor, but it's a very useful one. You can get a lot done with a single blade, but at least definitely for money, you definitely want to emphasize both properties, and Bitcoin Cash has that. And we're focusing on the utility side to where people will want it and use it, to where more people will want it and use it. And then you get the network effects, and then there's more demand, and then there's more value, which leads to a price rise. And we are not necessarily there yet. I mean, and I did want to add this earlier when you asked me, how Bitcoin Cash makes sense now. And it really, and Bitcoin and cryptos in general makes sense to people who want to buy drugs online. Because those are the vendors that are accepting it and actually using the network.
It was the first killer app,
absolutely.
Silk Road. It really, really got Bitcoin Cash more or less, not Bitcoin Cash, sorry, Bitcoin, more or less mainstream. And I think we're ready for a new iteration of that with something else, not drugs, because I think that's now more in the Zcash Monero area. Mm-hmm. And I think also Bitcoin, I'm sure. But yeah, I think we've got something new, and I think that is, these areas that I mentioned previously, like financial services, which can circumvent these licensing laws, regulations, just like Uber, and do it legally. So these companies that will be built in this way, they could become like 10 billion worth companies, just like Uber, I think.
And to bring back your point of Saipan, am I pronouncing that correctly? Saipan?
I think so. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
So we had Silk Road, which was a huge prototype, for the network working itself. It's being used. It's very prevalent, and that's obviously what led to the hype train and the price rise. And so that was in the purely digital realm. And I think, Tobias, you make the case that Saipan can be the prototype in the physical realm, with Saipan being more friendly, being a more friendly regulatory environment. It's more community based, and I think they have the crypto frontier there, and they're setting up merchants, and you have people that will actually use Bitcoin and are interested in using Bitcoin, to where Saipan can really be a kind of Silk Road level prototype in the real world, which can then be used as a reference when you're selling and onboarding merchants in other areas of the world, which is of high interest to me and for what I'm got planned once Bcash gets rolled out.
I think that's
we'll keep a room free for you. Yeah, you can. We'll get you on Saipan.
I think that's the perfect. Really, Sean put it into perfect perspective, because we're taking all the lessons of the last 3 years for adoption, medium of exchange, the Hayden Ottos of the world, the Sean Ballards of the world who go out and, door to door it, in Hayden's case, created Bitcoin Cash City in Townsville, Australia. And we keep moving that theme forward with all these lessons, this institutional knowledge, and bringing it back to these fundamental economic ideas, these principles. They're, to a lot of us anyway, it's just axiomatic that if it's going to succeed, it has to kind of fall along these lines. So that's a really great. Saipan is going to be a really interesting idea to see kind of Hayden Otto's Townsville 2.0, put into play with, and we'll do a whole separate show on Saipan and their interest in stablecoins and so on. But there's a whole, I just see it kind of coming together. And what the glue to me anyway seems to be Bitcoin ABC, the new Coinbase rule, and after November 15th, there's going to be a lot of clarity on that front, I think. So let's kind of end it here with any last thoughts, Tobias, and then we'll give it back to Sean, and we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, so maybe one thought that just popped into my head. The reason or the case for stablecoins is that I think I think Ethereum will have, because a lot of smart contracts, according to the FinCEN rules, are money transmitters, so they need licensing in some cases, but they currently don't. So I think there will be a huge realization of that, and I think Ethereum could drag down the market quite a bit if people realize that. That's what I'm kind of afraid of. I think that needs more space to fully explain and explore than this here right now. That's why, and we can't really expose merchants to that risk, I think, especially in Saipan, which isn't the richest place in the US. Also hit due to the corona impact. But if we have the stable coins, then it's kind of many merchants won't even know that they're using crypto. And I think that's the key. If we can make it so people don't even know they're using crypto. I mean, people ask me this is so complicated, crypto, it's so complicated. And then I tell them, then I ask them, okay, but how, if you make a transaction or a bank wire, how does it work? And of course they don't know because nobody knows. And I think that's where we need to get with crypto, where on the one hand, you don't have to know it, and you don't even really want to know it. I don't want to know how a bank wire works, and not really. And I think that's the goal. And I think with stuff like B.Cash, which basically makes things really, really easy to handle, it puts it into a physical thing. That's definitely a very promising way to achieve that.
Very nice. And so I think we'll end it there. I've been talking with Sean Ballard and Tobias Ruck, two builders on Bitcoin Cash, who look forward to the new Coinbase rule and hopefully a stable infrastructure going forward, a stable community focused on the roadmap after November 15th. Sean Ballard, how can we find your work and follow you if going forward here? How do people find you online?
I am transparent as all be out. My Twitter handle is Sean Ballard, just my name. And I have a lot of writings on re.cash, which kind of more neatly puts my philosophy and view of things into writing. And to something that came to mind when Tobias was talking was, and it's very useful to think of Bitcoin Cash as a value transfer network. I think that's what Vin is really pushing, the pedantry that all is Vin Armani, which I love him for. But to sign off and give a rallying cries to everyone that's involved in the Bitcoin Cash ecosystem is seek profit and make things happen, boots on the ground. We don't need to be on Reddit and Twitter, fighting over the network effect and continuing on the Civil War, we can now get back to building and utilizing and back to the fundamentals. And that's what I'm really excited about and would implore everyone to do, is get into your local communities and affect change.
Hear, hear. And Tobias Ruck, how can people find your work and keep up with you online?
Just subscribe on my Twitter at Tobias Ruck. Tobias, how did you say it? Tobias Ruck, I think he said it. I think that's how I'll go with. And I for some reason people started unsubscribing. Or maybe my singing wasn't perfectly tuned, but I'm working on that. So if you want to, I'm not sure if I should phrase it that way. So if you want to get interesting thoughts from me, just go to @Tobias Ruck on Twitter. I'm also on YouTube with the same name. I'm pretty transparent there, Tobias Ruck. And yeah, I will certainly give more substantive updates on my journey to Saipan. I think that.
When do you plan on going there?
Tuesday.
Wow. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, that'll be an adventure that will be fun. And maybe if this gets released, maybe the adventure even started or is on the verge of completing. So maybe you know more than presence, Tobias.
Very cool. I'll have links to everything in the show notes, to Sean Ballard's read.cash and Tobias Ruck's Twitter and YouTube and all that good stuff. I really appreciate the time, gentlemen. I know it's been a long day for both of you, and appreciate all the efforts. Maybe after the 15th, I'll have you back on, and we'll talk a little bit about the fallout and what we see forward for Bitcoin Cash, peer-to-peer electronic cash. But until then, Sean, man, thanks so much. And Tobias, thanks again.
Yeah, thank you, Kelso.
Thanks, man.